So as we're going through the Yoga Sutras, we have yoga is the process of ending the definitions of the field of consciousness. That's how we need to kind of consider it. Then the seer, what you are, abides in its own nature. And I want to take a moment to speak to this idea of the seer. So we're all different ages here, right? But whatever age you are, I want you to just pay attention to how you feel right now as with your ability to observe what's going on. You know, you're here, you're present, you're listening to me talk, you feel your body, you've had breakfast, you've traveled from wherever. You were able to observe that, and you're of a certain age. Now, I want you to think back maybe 10 years ago. Think back to what you were doing 10 years ago. Just, I don't know, maybe a big event happened or what you were working on or what you were playing at, who knows. But put yourself back in one of those moments 10 years ago. Aside from the difference of how you might look or what your body feels like or what you were doing, do you really feel any different than you did 10 years ago? I mean, the you that like observes this. Let's go back to when you were a child. And when you feel like, when you look out, you know, from this kind of awareness of the child, sure, you see child things happening, right? But when you kind of notice this part of you that witnessed all of that, I guess the question is, does the witnessing part of you actually feel different? Not much. It might a little bit, you know, I mean, big things happen in your life and that can really knock you around a bit. But the reason I'm making this statement is because when you begin to kind of observe that, then you start to recognize that there is something, a seer within you, which doesn't really change. You change. I mean, your physical body changes. Maybe even your mental state changes. I mean, I feel radically different than I felt 5 years ago. The way I interact with the world, the way I think about things, that is different. But the witness, the observer is not different. And so this is why in yoga, there's this emphasis on then the seer abides in its own nature. We're learning to direct our awareness to be this seer. And when you can do that, you are less disturbed by the changes within life. You are less ruled by your mind and your emotions, because the more you observe this, the more you might be staying around and maybe you feel a little agitated about something, but it doesn't matter because you just know that that is your emotional state. You know that that is just, you know, your hormones, who knows, but you know it's not you. You know that tomorrow it's probably going to be different. Or maybe you go through a period of grief or loss and it's really sad, but you've practiced this enough that you've observed yourself as the witness of the seer, that it doesn't interfere with your grieving. It doesn't interfere with what you need to be doing appropriately in life, but you know that it's not going to last forever. You know that you are this witness, you know you are this seer. And when that starts to happen, then you become free. You begin to experience kaivalya, freedom. And that's really the whole point of this process. And this is also why it's not a really popular process, because most people really want to be caught up in their moods. They want to be caught up in defining themselves through this or that. And I don't know about you, but that gets exhausting. So most people come to Kriya Yoga and most people come to meditation after they've been exhausted by life. And that's often why it's recommended to begin your spiritual practice after you've gone to school, after you've raised a family, after you've had 13 puppies, after, you know, you've done all these things, because you've seen that, you know, every single puppy has basically been the same and it dies and you get sad. And it's like repetitious. It's like in Buddhism, they talk about, you know, this repetitious wheel of samsara. Well, you just see it enough and eventually you're like, something happens and you're just kind of tired of it. I mean, maybe that's not your experience, but that was kind of my experience. And then you need to find a way to rise above that, because if you don't, then you're just kind of like, you know, bitter and depressed and cranky. And that's not really the way to be. So what we're learning to do is to redirect our awareness back to the seer. And I am skipping around a lot in these Yoga Sutras because I do have other things that you can study to go more deeply into this. But I'm going to skip to Sutra 112, where it talks about how do we end these definitions? How do we end these things which we keep defining ourselves through? And that is by practice, Abhyasa, and non-attachment, Vairagya. And practice is just doing the meditation routine that you are taught. That is practice. And then learning to appreciate the after effects of that practice. Meditation itself, you are not, hopefully, you understand, you are not here. I'm not here to teach you to meditate so that you can learn to practice for 12 hours a day. Meditation is a training protocol that allows you to become strong spiritually and within your consciousness so that you can live your life freely and appropriately as a unique individual of this infinite consciousness. So I look at it as though, it's as if when you go to exercise and you go to the gym, you go there for a half hour, an hour a day. Why do you do that? You do that so the other 12 hours that you're interacting, you're strong. You can do what you need to do. You can be appropriate to life. Your meditation practice is a specific time of training to intensely learn to abide as this witnessing presence. And then what you will find is the more you do that, you'll be done meditating, you'll go to work, or you'll go for a walk, or you'll go have lunch with your in-laws or whatever. And you will find that strength, that spiritual strength, that clarity that has come from the practice stays with you. And then practice becomes maintaining that in your daily life, right? Because what a lot of people do is they meditate and they learn through meditation to get in a very peaceful state, a very internalized state. But then they go back into the world and they immediately become cranky and grumpy again, and that's sort of missing the point. While we are alive, while we are breathing, while we have something to do in this world, while you are breathing, you have something to do here. What it is, that's up to you to figure out, but you have something to do. Your practice in the very beginning becomes learn to sit and meditate for a half hour to an hour, once or twice a day. That is your practice at first. You don't have to stress yourself out beyond that. But once that becomes solid and strong, then your practice is to go deep into that experience and then carry it with you for as long as you can into your daily life. That is what practice is. So we have to kind of get a sense of that first. And then I just love that non-attachment is one of these things that in the definitions, because non-attachment isn't simply becoming aloof to the world. I did that. I remember when I first started practicing Kriya Yoga, I was 20 and I was very fanatical about everything. If I learned something and I thought this was the right way to be, I wanted to tell everyone about it and I thought everyone should be doing it. And if I heard that you have to be non-attached, well, I was absolutely going to be non-attached. Things went wrong. What did I do? Well, that doesn't really matter, does it? Because I'm non-attached. If things went well, I don't care. I wasn't really non-attached. I was just playing. I was doing my best to act in a certain way. My wife, Melissa, her grandparents died. And what did I say? Well, it doesn't really matter because we're all infinite spirit, rather than just being with her and grieving through the process, right? So when I'm talking about non-attachment, I don't mean be a jerk. When I'm talking about non-attachment, I mean internally be non-attached, which means that if I was wise enough way back in the day when my wife's grandparents died, I would have just cried with her. But internally, I would have been free. Internally, I would have known that this is just part of life, but I wouldn't be acting in that sort of hard way about it. When you are with people and they're having fun, you don't have to say, well, I'm a yogi. I don't really care about pleasure and pain. No, if you're with people who are having fun and you are non-attached, you are able to be with them in the moment in joy. But when the joy is over, you don't think about it anymore. You just move on to the next thing. So non-attachment is really being appropriate in the present moment all the time. It's okay sometimes to be angry. Sometimes it's appropriate to be angry, as long as you're not being malicious or vicious to someone. But sometimes it is absolutely appropriate to be angry. But the problem is when you define yourself through it. So when we think about non-attachment, it's the ability to flow with the experiences of life, and it's the ability to be adaptable and to change when you need to change. And the reason this helps in your deeper meditation process is because when you sit to meditate, if you are thinking about all this other stuff, you are attached to the other stuff. So when you sit to meditate, you have to tell yourself, for this half hour, 20 minutes or hour, I am going to practice absolutely letting go of everything else, because you can't do anything about it anyway in that 20-minute to hour period of time. And what you find is you might have to force it. You might have to really get in there and kind of have a talk with yourself about it. But in time, it then becomes easy for you to just sit down, and the world could be falling apart around you. And you are able to say, well, I can't do anything about it now, so I'm just going to practice this technique, and you are able to do it. And then as you go into life, that flows over into life. So when we think about non-attachment, we don't want to turn it into some kind of like militant, fanatical way of living life. It's very subtle. And this is also why it is sometimes difficult for people to be successful on the spiritual path, because it does require the ability to appreciate nuance, the ability to ride that razor's edge of what is appropriate. Because what do most of us want to do? We just want to look in a certain direction and go in that direction. We don't want to get off track. We don't want to make changes. We want to make a plan, and we want to get to the end of that plan. And if difficulties come up, it disturbs us, versus rather than saying, let's potentially go over there, but let's see what happens in between here and there that we might have to work with. And your spiritual path is going to be that way. You need to have the idea and the vision of what spiritual freedom is going to be like for you. So right now, or this weekend, I want to encourage you to be thinking about, if I was yogically free, if I was experiencing kaivalya, if I was experiencing this state of freedom, what would my life look like? Have that in your mind, because this will help to inspire you to get up every day and do what you need to do, or to practice the yamas and niyamas. You need to have that. And then as you go through life, you need to have the ability to try to get there, but then notice how you might need to dance with the process a little bit. You know, it's not going to be the same for all of you. And then you need to be able to breathe and be comfortable, still aiming for that, you know, that idea that you have of what spiritual freedom is going to be like, but move there with adaptability. And if you think about it, that is really going to be a great explanation of non-attachment, because you're not attached to it looking a certain way. And then one more thing about that is, whatever you think it's going to look like right now, it's not going to be like that. But you need to have enough of an idea and a goal to move in that direction, and then be adaptable. Well, what is it like? You know, when I first began practicing and studying with Mr. Davis, I had a very interesting idea of what it was going to be like. And I was also very sort of, I was kind of religious. I mean, I was a little more engaged in using the word God, and I really liked chanting to all the Hindu deities and these types of things. But 23 years later, my experience feels very different than what I thought it was going to be like. But that's okay, because it's actually pretty good. So have an idea, move towards it, but be non-attached as you go. All right. Now, Sutra 113, practice is vigilance, abidance in remaining as the seer. Now, when you learn these techniques, When you read autobiography of a yogi or you watch famous YouTubers talk about Kriya Yoga, they really often put a lot of attention towards a technique doing something for you. And the technique itself is a tool. Yogananda would say that you use a meditation technique for as long as you need, but just like when you're working on something, when you don't need the tool anymore, you put it down. And all the techniques we're going to go over, the purpose of them is, again, to reverse this momentum so that you can catch a glimpse of the experience of yourself as the seer. And that is real practice, right? The techniques, they're practice, but the transformational part of it is holding your awareness as this seer. So I want to encourage you to remember what I talked about earlier on about kind of remembering your life and how you felt through life. Even throughout your day, take some time, not just during meditation, but to try to move into an experience of the seer. Meaning, like right now, you're all mostly awake and paying attention. That's great. But as you're having this experience, you're listening, but try to imagine what it would be like if you were just the witness, the observer. Like you weren't caught up in your thoughts about thinking about what I was saying. You weren't sort of labeling everything. If you could just pull back and experience yourself as the pure witness of this experience. And if you do that now, if you do that from time to time, that is occasionally touching that state of being the seer. And in your meditation, at other times, you might want to really try hard to stay there. Let's just try it for a minute, okay? So don't close your eyes. Just do what you're doing. You're just experiencing life. Imagine that your face is like a mask in a way. You know what you kind of feel like, and your eyes are kind of like looking out through that mask, and you can feel the body, and you can hear the sound of the AC or the cars. But now see how long you can just sit there without saying, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, he needs to talk a little louder. You know what I'm saying? Like that labeling that comes in. Just take a moment and just sit there and see how long you can stay present, just looking, feeling, without a thought coming in to tell you a story about what's going on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to get a timer out, but I'm going to say go. All right, and you're going to go. And you're going to try to do this. And I want you to raise your hand the moment a thought comes in to tell you something about this experience. All right. So just get ready. Let's take a few deep breaths just to really just kind of get pumped. All right. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. You raise your hand as soon as the thought pops in. Don't be afraid. Okay. All right. Well, good. So many of you are still going, but you see how quickly it happens, right? It's like all of a sudden you're present, and then just out of nowhere, it's like there's who is this other voice in your head that just keeps telling you stuff? That's really the question. So what is really useful to do, not when you're meditating for sure, but when you're just involved in your life, and you can do this when you're out to dinner with friends. You can do this when you're just for a hike. You can do this even when you're watching, your favorite show on Netflix. Just take a moment and just pull back into that witness and just wonder, how long can I sit here before that inner narrative starts going? Now, some people advise just doing that is enough. I don't agree with that. because I think you can actively increase your time. There's a video I did on YouTube called How to Hold Your Mental Breath. And the way I look at it, it's like when you're having a conversation with someone and they're talking, hopefully you're just listening because they're saying something interesting. But have you ever noticed that sometimes when you're interacting with another person, like you're just waiting for them to shut up so that you can say something? Have you ever noticed that? I mean, it doesn't happen to everybody, but it's like you're just waiting. Well, when you're just waiting, it's like you're holding back. You're not interfering. You might still be kind of trying to think about, but you're not actively saying anything. Well, I like to imagine that in your mind, you want to get to a point where you're aiming to do this process to abide as the seer. But it's as if you can feel the voice starting to come in and you want to be like, nope. And you might even say that, nope, or just be quiet. And what happens is in time, if you can sort of learn to hold your mental breath in these moments, and it might require that you say to yourself, no, or be quiet, or whatever you need to do. In time, it's like training an animal. In time, you tell it no enough, just the intention of being quiet settles it down. And this is a really internal process. But consider that and see in your daily life, start practicing this until eventually you will be able to just be present with someone. And it never comes up in your mind to think about any kind of judgment or any kind of conceptualization of what's going on. And then you will start to recognize you are moving more into that seer state. And then it starts to roll over into even your emotions, where something happens and where before you would get kind of emotionally charged. It's as though you start to recognize, oh, I don't even have to engage in that either. And again, this is where you start learning to experience freedom, a real internal freedom. And it takes practice. But practice is vigilant abidance, or vigilance remaining as the seer. And what you will find is once you start really getting into these meditation techniques, is those meditation techniques, in a sense, energize and empower you to have the ability to do that for longer and longer and longer, right? So that's why we're doing this. Now, what is non-attachment? It is the mastery of not clinging to objects experienced or described. Non-attachment is the mastery of not clinging to objects experienced or described. And again, this is a subtle thing where you begin to train yourself to not be troubled by what you do or don't have, right? And this comes naturally the more you practice meditation, and we'll get into the reasons why that's the case when we explore how meditation works in this tradition. But part of the first step in that is learning to acknowledge your attachments. When I was younger, I've always been a musician, and I would always really define myself through my musical instruments. If I got a scratch on it, like I would take care of them as best I could. If one was stolen, if I got a scratch on it, if anything happened to it, I would become upset. I would become sort of derailed by it. And it made sense because I really cherished my instruments. But in time, what I noticed was I'm not really that attached to my instruments anymore. I take care of them because you still want to take care of the stuff in your life. But if something happens to it that is unavoidable or that I couldn't have helped, I just let it go. The same thing is true with relationships. And this is why, Mr. Davis, I'm going to say he was kind of a loner, but I think a lot of yogis are sort of loners. He put such an emphasis on your Kriya Yoga practice that it was almost as if you could get the sense that he didn't think you should really think too much about relationships. I remember he would tell stories about, we're teaching Kriya Yoga, we're teaching people how to be free. And then I get a letter saying I can't come to the retreat because my cat died. And he'd be like, what are these people thinking? It's more important to learn how to be spiritually free than it is to worry about the fact that your cat died. Or I can't come to a retreat because one of my friends is having a wedding. And in his mind, he was like, you should be at the retreat. Because to him, the most important thing was waking up. And I feel that way too for the most part. But when it comes to relationships, many people don't want to make the changes. And I think this is maybe why he was so emphatic about this kind of a thing. Many people don't make the changes they need to, spiritually speaking, because they still want to get along with all their friends. And again, you need to have friends. I have friends. Friends are very good for you. But the trouble is when your friends get in the way of your ability to go to sleep on time so that you can wake up in the morning and meditate well. When your friends act in such a way that there's always drama in their life and you're always having to kind of deal with their drama, that is taking you away from your important focus in life, spiritually speaking. So when it comes to this idea of non-attachment and things like friendships or your career, sometimes you have to change the way you work in life so that you can put your awareness to this. Now, I think absolutely you need to provide for your family and your resources, but there have been numerous students that I have met who realized they were working too much. They were too caught up in how they were defining themselves to their job. They actually moved places where the cost of living was lower so that they didn't have to be stressed about having to work to meet their needs all the time. One of Yogananda's students, he had a printing business, and he had the opportunity to grow his business a lot more than he did. But he told Yogananda he wasn't going to do that. He was going to keep it just at the level to where he could deal with it, manage it, to provide for his family, and so that he would have time to meditate in the evening and in the morning without the distraction of all the stress that could come with the business growing and growing and growing. So when we think about this idea of non-attachment, it's not just, I'm attached to ice cream. It's learning to observe and recognize what are the things that are keeping us from doing what we know we need to do in order to make this a very important thing and to do it well. Because again, I'm going to say this repeatedly, the Kriya Yoga process is a subtle internal process. And if your life is filled with drama and distraction and confusion, you are not going to be able to navigate those subtler states of awareness. You're just not. So that's why living a very simple life is ideal, and non-attachment plays into this. So the practice of abiding as the seer, figuring out how you can engage in non-attachment in your life, these are the things that are going to make it so that after a few years, when you sit down to meditate, you will be able to experience what Yogananda, what Sri Yukteswar, what Roy, what Lahiri Mahasaya, you will be able to experience what they talk about as a superconscious or a samadhi state. It is absolutely accessible to you. You can do it. You just have to really engage the process. You have to do what they say you have to do. You can't kind of do it, right? You can kind of do it. And if you kind of do it, you will feel a little calmer inside. You will have a little more balance in life, but you will always wonder, why don't I experience the inner light? Why don't I feel free in spirit when I go into meditation? It is only by doing these specific things that we're going to be covering this weekend that you will be able to do that. Does this make sense? Okay, good.